Hello, University of Maryland. Welcome. Please take your seats. We're going to get started now. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the 8th annual Women Leading Women event honoring Carly Fiorina this evening. My name is Allison Schwartz. I'm the Executive Director of Alumni Relations at the Robert H. Smith School of Business. I thank you all for coming as we continue this great tradition to showcase our fearless Smith alumni and other enterprising women in business from the classroom to the C-suite. I'd like to recognize our past Women Leading Women honorees that are here with us this evening. If you could please stand. Margarita Chang, Kristen Welch, and Lisa Anders. It is now my pleasure to invite Alex Triantis, Dean of the Robert H. Smith School of Business, to the stage.
Thank you so much, Allison, and welcome everyone. It's just a delight to be here for the 8th annual Women Leading Women event, and we have so many students, faculty, staff, alumni here. Very exciting to see you all here, and of course, this helps us to kick off Women's History Month, so happy Women's History Month to all of you. On your chairs, by the way, you're either sitting on or holding or under your seat are a couple of important things. One is, of course, a flyer about Carly Fiorina's new book, but the other that you'll hear a lot more about. But there's also a flyer about our graduate programs, which some of you have already gone through and can testify to everything that you read there. But I just wanted to let you know we also have some admissions folks here that during the reception, we'd be delighted if you chatted with them as well. So it's now my pleasure to introduce the two ladies that are going to be in these seats here, Nicole Coomber, our moderator this evening, and also Carly Fiorina. So starting with Nicole, Nicole is an associate clinical professor in management and organization. In addition to teaching management, leadership, and consulting, she's also dedicated to helping women manage their complex lives more effectively. Nicole writes about these topics in the Washington Post and Forbes, on WAMU, and also Insights with Impact. And she writes about work-life integration at mgmtmama.com, which is managementmama.com, and also about education on a blog, Teaching with Coomber. Nicole has a PhD in education policy and leadership from the University of Maryland, and she is the mom of 4 lively boys between the ages of 3 and 8. So work that out to get a sense of what her life is like. So Carly Fiorina, as you all know, is the founder and chairman of Carly Fiorina Enterprises and the Unlocking Potential Foundation. Carly is a 1980 MBA graduate of the Smith School and is a true leader and seasoned problem solver. Her experience spans from secretary to CEO, from public to private, and from for-profit to nonprofit. Her mission is to inspire, equip, and connect individuals and teams to seize opportunities, to face challenges, and to accelerate impact in their communities and places of work. Carly is also a best-selling author, and her 3rd book, Find Your Way, Unleash Your Power and Highest Potential, comes out on April 9th. So you are getting a preview, which is very lucky for us all. So please join me in welcoming both Nicole Coomber and Carly Fiorina to the stage.
So welcome. Thanks so much for coming back.
Great to be here.
We are really excited.
I never made it to the grand ballroom in the student union. It's very impressive.
It's very grand.
Yes.
Well, we have a lot of people here tonight who are really excited to learn more about you and to get a little bit of insight into your path. So most people know your journey. You went from Stanford to here at the Smith School for your MBA, then to the Sloan School at MIT for a Master's of Science in Management, then to AT&T, then to Lucent, and then to HP, where of course you became CEO. And we sort of hear that and we think, oh, sounds like a really smooth trajectory. Was it?
Definitely not. And of course, because you're gracious, you left out a few of the bumps along the way. Like, yes, I got a degree from Stanford, but I majored in medieval history and philosophy. So there is hope for all of you history and philosophy majors out there, but, I graduated in the middle of a very deep recession. There weren't a lot of jobs, for women, so I did what I was really good at, which at that time was pleasing my parents. And my parents wanted me to go to law school, so I went to law school. I hated law school so much that I quit. I had the presence of mind to leave before the first exam. So now my resume read medieval history, philosophy, law school dropout, and I needed to pay the rent. So I went, I had helped put myself through Stanford as what we used to call a Kelly girl. We don't call them that anymore. It's not politically correct. We say Kelly temporary personnel, but back then we were mostly women, girls in the parlance of the time, and I typed and filed and answered phones for local businesses. And so I knew how to do that. So I went to work full-time as a receptionist for a 9-person real estate firm. And that was my introduction to business. I had no plans. I had to run away to Italy to teach English for a year. But eventually, I decided to get an MBA based on the inspiration, the encouragement that I got from 2 men in that very small office. And I will add to the bumps in the road by saying when I applied to the Smith School, I was rejected. And I was rejected because my application didn't get in time, because I was living in Italy teaching English. So, because I really had no plan, I really had to get into business school. I called Rudy Limon. That's my first conversation with Rudy Limon, and I said, really, you should let me in. That was about the extent of the strength of my argument, and he did. Then I landed at AT&T after Rudy's encouragement and a great education here at the Smith School, but frankly, I was totally ill-prepared. There weren't very many women. I didn't know anything about communications or technology, and the management philosophy at that time in a big corporation was throw her into the deep end of the pool and see if she sinks or swims. My first meeting with a client was held in a strip club, because that's where men went to do business in those days. And I either showed up to meet the clients, or I couldn't do my job. So no, it was not a smooth trajectory. I could go on, but I'll leave it there.
In your new book, Find Your Way, you talk about path over plan. Can you explain a little more about that?
Yeah, so people sometimes say to me, well, you must have had a plan to become a CEO. That must have been your ambition. And the truth is, I never had a plan to become a CEO, and that was most definitely not my ambition. The truth is, when I landed in AT&T, and I'm not exaggerating, my ambition initially was, please let me hold on to my job. Let me not get fired. Then, as I got a little more experience, I realized that everywhere I looked, I saw problems. And everyone I talked to talked about the problems. Maybe you do that too. I mean, we all have problems, right? We have problems in our families, problems in our communities, problems in our universities, in our classrooms, in our communities, and we all talk about them. We all know what they are, but they so frequently don't get solved. And I started talking with other people who were experiencing some of the same problems, and I realized that they actually had really good ideas about how to solve the problems. And so I started collaborating with them. And we started solving problems. And then my ambition became to continue to solve problems. And then I learned that the more challenging the circumstances were, the more fun I had. And so I started taking on riskier assignments, more challenging assignments, more problem-filled assignments. So the path that I talk about in Find Your Way is don't have a plan. I know a lot of people who have had the plan. I'm going to get to be a CEO by the time I'm 40. I want to make sure I make this much money by the time I'm 35. I want to have these possessions. They're on plan. And I've also observed that when you're on plan, a couple things happen. Number one, you may miss opportunities that come along because you're so fixated on where you think you're trying to go, you miss what's happening all around you. The other thing that can happen is you get to wherever you thought your destination was, and you figure out it's not really what you thought it was going to be. Or you get to your destination and it doesn't sustain you. Or you don't get to your destination at all. And every single one of those occurrences can be really debilitating. And so, no, I never had a plan to be a CEO, but I did always focus on solving the problems right in front of me, in my path, and working with the people around me who knew a lot about how to make those problems better. And what I've learned is if you focus on solving problems, which is the purpose of leadership, and you're aware of what's going on around you, and you're not afraid of risks and challenges, opportunity will knock. And then you have to have the courage to walk through the door.
Solving problems is the focus of leadership. I'm going to use that in my MBA class. I love it.
Solving problems is the purpose of leadership. And I think a big part of what I try and say in this book, and we've been chatting about all afternoon with some of your wonderful professors in administration here, is we are so confused about what leadership is. I was confused. When I was a secretary many years ago, I thought the leader was the guy, it was always a guy, in a big office with a title, a parking space, the perks, the power, the money. And then I got a little older and wiser and learned that people with position and title frequently aren't leading. And we tend to call people leaders because they have title and position and power. But that isn't what makes them a leader. In fact, so often the people we put in positions of leadership are anything but. And so leadership, a leader solves problems. A leader collaborates with others. A leader changes the order of things for the better. That's what leaders do. And a leader can do that without a title or position. I'm living proof. Or someone can have a title and position and do none of that at all.
So you've spoken a bit about what it was like when you joined AT&T. You were one of the few women there. You met clients in a strip club. I can't imagine what that was like.
It was bad.
I wanted you to see if you could share, maybe any other times when you felt like you were treated differently because of your gender, because you're a woman. Just to kind of give a sense, there's plenty of women in the audience and women out in the world who've experienced, and maybe you can offer some advice and some solace to us, because I think it helps us in our journey and our path.
Well, I do think if you're different, you're treated differently. I think that's reality. And I think one of the reasons that people who are different are treated differently is because we get very hung up in organizations or communities or politics on what people look like and whether they look like us. We've gotten very tribal in politics. And we also so often confuse leadership with style or appearance. So when I was at AT&T, I wrote about this in my first book, Tough Choices. Everybody talked about the 42 long. The 42 long was the suit size of everyone who aspired to leadership at AT&T. I'm not kidding. He's a 42 long. He's a natural leader. Well, first of all, what someone looks like has nothing to do with their leadership skills. I could tell you a million examples of that. So yes, people are treated differently, and so often people see style or appearance as qualifying for leadership or not. And Anyone who's different, certainly women are still too different in the work environment, has to overcome that. So here's another story as an example. When I became a manager for the first time, I had 3 people who reported to me. This was a big deal to me. And my new boss brought me into a room to introduce me to my new subordinates. And he said, "Meet Carly, your new boss. She's our token bimbo." I'm not sure people would talk like that today, although sometimes people act in that same way. And I kind of laughed my way through it. I didn't want to make it an awkward situation. But then later, I sat at my desk and I thought, you know, if I cannot ask someone to respect me, then I will never earn respect. And so I walked into my boss's office and I closed the door and I said, "Bob, you will never do that to me again." I could tell you a million stories. What I would say, what I've learned through all of that is for every bad story I could tell you, I can tell you 10 good ones. 10 good ones about women and men who lifted me up and helped me be better. And so the lesson I've taken from that is if you confront a bad situation and a bad person, you have to confront that. But most people are not bad, although they may be afraid of something. The guy who took me to the strip club, just as an example of this, he and I turned out to be great teammates. And the reason I could get over that experience was because he felt more like a fool at the end of it than I did. And the respect that he had in the office declined dramatically after that. But beyond that, I suddenly realized he was afraid of me. He was afraid of the shiny new model with the MBA that he thought was trying to take away his job. And once I could find that empathy for his situation and be humble enough to realize I actually needed him, the clients liked him, we could collaborate together. So my lesson from all that is don't get a chip on your shoulder. There are bad people out there, bad men out there, and they have to be confronted, but most people aren't. And for every one person who's going to put you down, and they exist, there will be others who will lift you up. So spend your time and your energy with the people who lift you up, and spend no energy on the people who will tear you down. And the other thing that I would say is, and sometimes we women do this, don't hide your light under a bushel. Don't be less smart than you are because it makes someone uncomfortable. Don't be less brave than you are because it makes someone uncomfortable. Don't be less assertive than you are because it makes someone uncomfortable. And don't let people criticize you for your style or your appearance. If you take that stuff inside, it becomes your problem. It isn't your problem. It's their problem. Be as good as you are and seek out the people who know how good you are and who will help you be better.
Very powerful advice. 2 words I just want to draw upon: empathy and humility. Really great words when thinking about leadership.
Well, they're critical.
Yeah.
Because without humility and empathy, you cannot actually collaborate with people. And unless you can collaborate with people, particularly people different than you are, you can't really solve problems.
So you talked about people lifting you up, and you spoke about the 2 men in your real estate firm who really encouraged you to go get an MBA, and your relationship with Rudy. And so we know from the research that sponsorship is really important to women's careers. And so I wondered if you could speak a little bit as to the mentors and sponsors that you've had and how they impacted your career.
Yeah, you know, when I was coming up, we didn't have words for them. We didn't call them mentors and sponsors. And I'm not denigrating the words at all. It's just those words came into the lexicon later. And so what I look for to this day, are people who told me the truth and people who had my best interests at heart, people who wanted me to succeed. And I will pause there and say, I think that's how you tell the difference between criticism and feedback. If you're different, you're going to get criticized a lot. If you're leading, you're really going to get criticized a lot, because the reason problems fester is because people don't actually want to change the way things are. And the reason people have a hard time changing the way things are is to challenge the status quo means you will open yourself up to criticism, always. And so if problem solving is the purpose of leadership, criticism is the price of leadership. And so leaders have to learn to withstand the criticism. But feedback you need a lot of. And feedback comes from people who care about you, who want you to be better, who want you to be successful, and who are prepared to tell you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. And so I spent a lot of time looking for people like that. And that was one of the very few women, for example, in AT&T at the time. She has since become one of my dearest friends in the world. My husband, Frank, and I were married in her home. But at the time, she looked to me like that, oh my gosh. She was pregnant out to here. I mean, I'll never forget the first time I saw her, immensely pregnant, these fantastic legs, these wonderful shoes. She had all the guys just spinning around, and she was a boss way up there, 2 levels above me, and she would tell me the truth and about the way things were, about how people were reacting, and what the lay of the land was. And she also had my best interests at heart. Or I could tell you about an executive vice president when I moved up in the world. If you text Carly to 345-345. We'll give you a further preview of the book, and you can get a couple more stories. But the point is, whether they're called mentors or sponsors or friends or advisors, look for people who lift you up, not by always telling you what you want to hear. Look for people who lift you up by caring about you, caring enough about you to put their shoulder to the wheel with you and to tell you the truth when you need it. And sometimes those people are above you, sometimes they're alongside you in an organization, and just as often, they are actually lower in the organization than you are. That's okay, they can still be your mentor and your sponsor.
So I want to talk a little bit about your MBA. And we've talked about the path that led you to come to get your MBA, and that you were teaching in Italy at the time, which sounds amazing. I wanted to know a little bit what you think some of the specific benefits were. How did it help you in your journey? So you went from the MBA into AT&T. What did you learn here that you took with you that maybe our students who are currently in the MBA program or thinking about getting their MBA could learn from?
Well, the first thing that I would say it gave me, and this was actually huge, and although it may not be a problem for a lot of MBA students, it gave me confidence. I would never have believed that I could walk into a mammoth corporation. AT&T at the time had 1 million employees. I was 1 in a million, literally, and at the very bottom of the totem pole. And so having an MBA gave me the confidence to even apply for the job, much less accept the job. But I think more specifically, when you get an MBA, when I got an MBA, and I think it's still true, you're not an expert in anything. You're not getting a master's in finance, or you're not an expert in anything, but you know enough about a lot of things. You know enough about a lot of things to ask the right questions about virtually anything you will encounter. And that turns out to be incredibly important. Understanding enough to ask the right questions about what you will encounter, and knowing enough to discern whether the answer you're getting is real or BS, or whether you need more information, is an incredibly important skill. In fact, I would say that asking the right question is a far more important skill of someone who aspires to leadership than always knowing the right answer. Because you're never always going to know the right answer, but you do need to know what you should find out. So that's what an MBA equipped me to do. Ask the right questions and be able to judge the answers I was getting.
Are there any things that our students should currently think of, don't leave your MBA program without taking advantage of certain benefits or perks or ways of getting to know people in the program?
Well, I would give this advice generally, but I would certainly give it for MBA students here as well. Remember when you were a little kid and somebody in your life, a parent, a guardian, somebody, a big brother or sister, taught you how to cross the street. And they would take your hand and they would say, stop, look, and listen. That's really good advice for everything. And there are a lot of people who go charging into a situation, sometimes people with an MBA, who go charging into a situation thinking, okay, I'm here to prove how much I know, I'm here to take the world by storm. The most important thing is to stop, look around you, see what's going on, listen to what's going on, understand your environment. What I would say to MBA students is, when you are in school, I would say this to when you are in school, it is an incredibly rare and privileged and important time in your life. It is the time when you can stop, look, and listen to so many things. And so take advantage of all the things that you can stop and look at and listen to while you're here. Make the most of it. I know it sounds corny, but it's true. Go talk to professors that you haven't had a chance to take a class from. Go talk to people that you perhaps haven't had a chance to work with. In particular, seek people out that you think are different than you. Seek people out that you think you may not agree with. Because if you can look and listen and learn something from people that aren't the same as you, that's a big thing to take away.
There's a false narrative out there that we have this ability, especially women, to perfectly balance our work and our life. There's one thing in your life in particular that I think is really meaningful and really powerful, and it's the fact that you battled breast cancer while you were in your burgeoning political career. You were entering into politics. You also had a family, you had work life, and you're battling cancer. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that experience and how were you able to make that all work? How did you make that work for you, for your family, for yourself?
Well, of course, is the age-old work-life balance question, and it's always our work-life integration you teach, and let's face it, we talk about it mostly about women's lives because we end up having to balance loads of things. I would say there is no silver bullet or magic answer. Of course, I didn't have your class to take, so maybe that's where it is, but at the same time, battling breast cancer and thinking about getting into politics, and we lost a child. She was struggling with the demons of addiction, and they took her as they take too many people. One of the things that I've learned over time is that, and I learned it when people would ask me the question, what's the most difficult decision you make? Or what's the toughest decision you've had to make? And over time, I learned that the most important decision I make is how I spend my time. And I learned in this work-life balance problem that no matter what decision I would make about how to spend my time, somebody would be unhappy. Somebody would be unhappy. Someone would want more. So I learned that I have to be very intentional and deliberate about how I spend my time, because time is the one thing we never get back, and how we spend our time becomes our life. How each of us choose to spend our time becomes our life. And so those choices can be unintentional and sort of haphazard, and we can be buffeted about by the demands and the desires of others, or we can make those choices in a very intentional, deliberate way. And so I've made my choices in intentional and deliberate ways, and I've owned those choices, meaning if someone isn't happy, so be it. These are my choices. I accept the consequences. I start with that because I think that discipline and that practice has, at critical points in my life, given me permission for myself to put the time where it really needed to be spent. So my time really needed to be spent going through my treatment. My time really needed to be spent trying to save my daughter's life. And there have been other examples in my career and in my life of that. So there is no easy answer. There is no magic bullet. Every single one of us come to the end of the day and think, whoa, did I do that right? But I review on a pretty rigorous basis, how do I spend my time? How did I spend my day? How did I spend my week? How did I spend my month? How did I spend my year? And if I don't like what that life looks like, then I try and change it. That's as close to a magic silver bullet as I got. Choose how you spend your time.
I love it. It's very powerful. So talking about how you're choosing to spend your time, you're now actively running the nonprofit you founded, Unlocking Potential. What is your mission and why did you start it?
So our mission at Unlocking Potential is to take everything I've learned about problem solving, leadership, building high performance teams, and applying it in the nonprofit world. I've had the privilege of leading several nonprofit organizations and working alongside many nonprofit organizations, and what I know is that they struggle with some of the most difficult, most important, most festering problems in our communities, and yet they are often not given the same investment in human capital that we take for granted at a business school or in a for-profit company. And so the fantastic team and our coaches work with nonprofits to lift leaders up wherever they are. Let me be very explicit in saying that experience has taught me that anyone can lead. Anyone can lead. Anyone can solve problems. But so often, people think it's not their job to lead, or they're not encouraged to lead, or they're not expected to lead. And so when we go to an organization, whether it's Easter Seals or Wounded Warriors or Doctors Without Borders or a set of organizations in Washington, D.C. who are working with the homeless community, we don't talk to just the people at the top of the house. We talk to everybody, because everybody is facing a problem and everyone can help solve that problem. That was the inspiration behind it. And we have 4 basic disciplines of leadership that all leaders possess, regardless of what they look like or what the context is or what the problem is they're trying to solve. There's 4 basic disciplines that we help people learn and practice: courage, character, collaboration, seeing possibilities, and 2 tools that I've used over and over again in every setting to actually solve problems and make progress. And if you want a hint of what some of those tools are, again, you can text Carly at 345-345. But these are basic but very powerful tools that work. That was the inspiration behind Unlocking Potential. The work is enormously fulfilling. Anyone can lead. We've got a lot of problems. I've always run to problems, and what I know, particularly having been in politics, is not everybody's focused on problem solving. Actually, politicians aren't focused on problem solving, they're focused on winning. I'm not saying they're all bad people. I'm saying the system of politics is about winning. It's not about problem solving. And yet, we have all these festering problems. And so I am convinced that the only way we're going to make real progress on the festering problems that we all recognize and we all talk about is we have to lift more leaders up, wherever they are, whoever they are, whatever they look like, in whatever setting they work in. And that's the mission of Unlocking Potential.
Lift more leaders up. So I want to turn to a bit of a hot topic, and it is women entering, you ran for president, one of the first women to run for the GOP presidency, and there we've seen women from all different places around the country at state, local, federal levels. Besides the fact that women are, of course, over 50% of the population, what do you think women are bringing to the table when they work in public policy?
Well, first, I think it's fantastic that so many women are getting involved in public service and in politics. And I think one of my regrets about politics is that women have allowed ourselves to be politicized. And that's a problem, I think, and that's a hot topic too. But what I mean by that is somehow we have this expectation that women should always agree on hot topics. Why do we think that? Men don't always agree. Why have we gotten to this place where we say, well, if you're a feminist, you have to think these things about these issues? No, actually not. And yet somehow we talk about women's issues. When women are half the population, every issue is a woman's issue. And we politicize women as an interest group. We are not a special interest group. We are the majority of the nation. So, by all means, women should get involved in politics, but let's not allow ourselves to be politicized as an interest group. Let's not let other people define what women think. We each are individual actors, just like men are. And we're going to define for ourselves what we think and what we believe and how we vote. And that's okay. That's the strength of this nation. Having said that, I do think women are natural problem solvers. We're natural problem solvers because we're juggling so many things in our lives. We're trying to solve problems in our families. We're trying to solve problems with our friends. We're trying to solve problems with... So we're natural problem solvers. And I think we, as a result, we tend to collaborate more easily sometimes. And those are essential qualities of leadership. They're not the only qualities, but they're certainly essential qualities of leadership. Sometimes women will, the reason I said don't hide your light under a bushel, is sometimes women will hide their light under a bushel and sort of step back when they should be stepping forward. That's why I said, you know, be as smart as you are, be as brave as you are. Some people are going to have a problem with it. Too bad, it's their problem. But women are problem solvers. And so I hope that people who enter public service decide that they're there for more than winning. They're there to actually solve a problem. It's going to be hard because the system is geared to winning, not to problem solving.
So it's time for our lightning round. These are quick questions, quick answers, and then we will take questions from the audience. I'm going to mix up my cards. Probably won't get a chance to do all of them. All right. First question. What advice would you give to your 20, 25, or 30-year-old self? You can pick one. Tell us what you were doing at the time and where you were.
Well, let's see. 20, you know, I was at Stanford. 25, I was flailing about trying to get into business school. 30, I was at AT&T. So it doesn't matter where I was. The same advice would apply. Don't worry so much about all the stuff that doesn't matter. Spend your energy on the stuff that does matter. And that too sounds so basic, but there are so many distractions of things that just don't matter. And you know, social media is a huge distraction. Honestly, how many people, especially for younger women and men, how much time do you spend thinking about your likes? Or checking, you know, Facebook or Instagram, or worrying about whether you've curated the photo just the right way. I mean, honestly, we spend enormous amounts of time. When email was the main business tool, I would ask folks, how much time did you spend today responding to emails? We have this expectation that we just have to respond. How much of that really matters? Very little, truthfully. So my advice to myself would be, don't worry so much about the things that don't matter, and spend time on the things that are really going to have impact. And that also is hard to do because the things that don't really matter consume enormous amounts of attention. in organizations, in relationships. And so when you start to say, I'm actually not gonna respond to these next 10 emails in the next 10 minutes because they don't matter, you get blowback. So choosing to focus on impact will create some criticism and friction as well. But in the end, it's a far more fulfilling, and I'm even gonna use the word joyful path. What I've learned, joy is important. And staying on a path and focusing on what's important and caring about impact, that brings you more joy than worrying about all the stuff that consumes too much time and attention.
What are your morning rituals? How do you spend the first 60 minutes of your day?
So the first 60 minutes of my day, first I have to get up and attend to my adorable dogs, don't we all? But then my husband and I have a cup of coffee together and we chat about the day we had or the day we will have. Then I need always time for reflection. That's important for me, to get centered. Time for reflection. I think about the day to come. I think about the day I had. Maybe I spend time thinking about how I've spent my time. I pray. I get introspective, and that centers me and prepares me for the day. And then on every day that I can, I get in a good workout because I think better and I feel better when I'm fit.
That's great. So do you have a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for success? Maybe another way of saying it is, do you have a favorite failure?
I think my favorite failure is I went into so many jobs not knowing what the heck I was doing. I mean, honestly, my first job at AT&T, I had no idea what I was doing, but it was true for many jobs. 3 jobs in, I went into the engineering department for the first time. I had engineers reporting to me. I didn't know the first thing about engineering. It turned out to be, when I went to HP, I was the first CEO ever from outside the company. I was the first woman to lead a Fortune 50. I wasn't from Silicon Valley. I wasn't from the industry. There was so much I didn't know. And yet, not knowing forced me to ask loads of questions. And I've talked about that before, but when you ask questions, you engage people. When you ask questions, you learn things. When you ask questions, you forge relationships, which make problem solving and collaboration easier down the road. And when you ask questions, you're frequently sent off in a direction you were not expecting, but which turns out to be absolutely the right way to go. Just one quick story about this. When I landed in that engineering job, I had engineers. I didn't know anything about engineering. And so I sat down and asked questions, and I remember asking this gentleman, Jim. He was kind of one of these guys you might overlook, reliable, dependable, not particularly flashy, not a 42 long. And I asked him, well, Jim, what are some problems you see in your work? And so he said, well, here's a problem. I designed circuits. That was way back when we designed circuits, and the bills that we get sent don't match the designs that I sent to the supplier. I said, well, what do you think we ought to do? He said, I think we ought to check them. So I said, okay, let's check them. And my role then was to enable him, empower him, give him the resources to check the bills. Jim saved us $3 million in a single year. Asking a question will take you somewhere you didn't expect, but it might take you exactly where you need to go.
So last question, we ask all women leading women honorees, very important. Heels or flats, and why?
Oh, both. Both.
Yes.
I mean, I'm a girl, I love shoes, all kinds of shoes. So, both. But I have to say, there's nothing like a great heel.
I think that the past 2 women that I've asked, both were on the heels side. So it's nice to hear both. And I saw that you're wearing your heels, Rita. So we'd love to open it up to the audience for questions. There's 2 microphones on either side. Don't be shy. Don't hide your light under a bushel.
Please don't be shy.
Carly loves questions. Go ahead and feel free to line up.
Or just approach. Yes, ma'am, and then we'll go to the lady on my right, your left. Go ahead.
Hello, Leah Jones, Maryland undergrad alumni business school. I wrote an essay on you actually to get into the
dear.
business school. So thank
Well,
you.
I'm glad you got in. That would
I
have been
know.
a double whammy for
It
Maryland.
worked out. So, but thank you for being here. You're truly an inspiration to all people, not just women. But my question is about criticism. So I work with male counterparts, and when I have been criticized, or feedback, I think they would call it feedback, but depending on how you
What
take
would you call it?
Depends on the day and my mood. But my question is, the feedback that I get is you're being defensive, right, in response to criticism. Now, I've talked to other women, and this is kind of a common theme, right? When women tend to be more defensive as they are receiving feedback, whereas, I think sometimes the perception with a male counterpart to feedback isn't perceived that way. So that's my own bias, but what I want to ask you, because I'm sure you have some thoughts about that, is what do you recommend in order to, accept the criticism, to be strong, to be perceived well by your male or female counterparts? And that's my question.
So the reason I ask, is it criticism or feedback? So sometimes I think the feedback that women or someone else who's different for another reason gets is around asking someone to be more like the norm. A lot of times feedback women get is actually about being more like a man. It's an issue of style. So in my day, by the way, there was this book called How to Dress for Success. And then there was the version How to Dress for Success for Women. And the book advised that we should try to look as much like men as possible. Seriously. So while we couldn't wear pants, that was before pants, but you had to wear a very severe dark suit, a white shirt, perhaps blue, buttoned to the throat, a little bow tie. I actually dressed like that for quite some time until I said this is absurd. That's an example of, that's how I was dressed when I went to the strip club, just to be clear. So,
Not to be confused with the dancers.
and I carried a briefcase. And the cab driver said, when I got in the cab, "Are you the new act?" So, more to take off, I think he was assuming. Anyway, my point in telling you that little story is so often the criticism is, well, you should do it this way because that's the way it's always been done. Or that's the way they do it, which is not necessarily the way you do it. If people cannot bring all of themselves to work, then they are not going to be as effective. You need to be who you are. Now, that doesn't mean you can't learn new things, but my first piece of advice would be learn to distinguish between criticism on style and feedback about performance. Feedback about performance tends to not have a lot of adjectives around it. It tends to be more fact-based. Feedback about impact tends to be focused on talking about a problem or a result. Here was a goal, you failed to achieve that goal. Why do you think you failed to achieve that goal? Here was a team, the team wasn't brought in, why not? Criticism that uses a lot of adjectives tends to be about style or appearance, not substance. Second thing I would say is try not to react in the moment. Very hard. Try not to react in the moment. Whatever, let's assume, give most people the benefit of the doubt. They're trying to help me. Assume that. I always assume the best of someone until they prove the worst. But until they prove the worst, I give them the benefit of the doubt. Assume someone's trying to be helpful. And so, before you react, pause, say something like, I really need to think about that. I'd like to think about that, thank you. And then go think about it. Pause, reflect, do not react. And then go back and tell this, whoever it is, what you actually think. I think this was valid, I don't think this was valid, I think we have a misunderstanding, go have an honest conversation. Feedback and criticism, feedback or criticism are an opportunity to have a substantive conversation that builds a relationship if done in the right way, and that may help you perform better if heard in the right way. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you for coming. I have to say that you were probably one of my favorite candidates in the last campaign run that you had.
Oh,
I thought
thanks.
that you and Rand Paul had the most sensible ideas. So my first, since nobody's behind me, I'm gonna ask 2 questions. I don't know if I can do that. My first question is, what is your future in politics? I was disappointed when I thought you were gonna run for the Senate for,
There was some feedback.
She got inspired.
No, ask her 2 questions. You thought I was going to run for the Senate?
I thought you were gonna run for the Senate, which I was excited about. My second question is, how can we get involved with your nonprofit?
Okay. So if you want to get involved, or if you want to learn more, seriously, it's very easy. Text Carly, C-A-R-L-Y, to 345-345, and tell us who you are, and we will reach out. We have wonderful coaching opportunities. We have a fantastic director of coaching. Most of our coaches work with us part-time. We train you up in the curriculum, or there may be other ways you want to get involved, but we'd love to hear from you, and we will absolutely contact you. What is my future in politics? I don't know. The reason I didn't run for Senate, I think the Senate is a completely dysfunctional body, and honestly, I didn't have much interest in being part of that body. I went into politics because I run into problems. I saw a lot of problems, and as I tried to express before, what I've learned being in politics is the system is geared to winning and winning over and over again. And so if you think about it, as citizens, may I just say, the system doesn't serve us well. Think about any problem you care about right now. I'm not going to go off on this too long, but pick your problem. Deficits, foreign wars, immigration, health care, veterans affairs, pick one. Have they been solved? Do we feel as though we're making progress? Actually, no. And the reason is because getting people focused on a problem and getting people mad about a problem tends to help win elections. People get revved up, they give money, but it's not solving the problem. And so I've sort of concluded that our politics, which I think is so often downstream of culture, our politics won't change unless we change it, which is why I'm focused on building up problem solvers and problem solving skills and lifting up leaders wherever they are. But I've lived long enough to say never, so I don't have a plan, remember? I just have a path.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Sadia Lau. I'm an undergraduate at the business school. I'm a marketing and theater major. And I guess my question is, we're at a time where the rich get richer and the poor stay poor. So what are your thoughts on diversity and inclusion and turning prosperity into equity in order to help progress the lives of women and people of color? And what are ways you're implementing strategies within your own company?
Okay, so that's a big question, and it's a really important question. And by the way, one of the things that problem solving requires is clear-eyed realism. We use a tool called current state, future state analysis, and we start by asking people to be clear-eyed, realistic, complete, and compelling about our current state. I start with that because our current state is indeed that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. That's a fact. Our current state is also that we have a long-standing, systemic issue that the history of slavery in this country has created and that we are not solving. And you see it in all kinds of ways. A clear-eyed assessment is also to say that corporate America today spends $8 billion a year on diversity and inclusion training, and we are making very little progress. If you look at boardrooms in America today, what you would find is that people of color and women are less than 16% of boards. And that number hasn't moved in 25 years, despite $8 billion a year. So we're not making progress. So you have to start by acknowledging all of that, the systemic, endemic consequences of slavery, the reality that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and that there are structural impediments to prosperity and success, and the reality that we can spend a lot of money and talk a lot of talk, and it ain't getting better. Let's just start with all that. So what am I doing in my world? Because I can't, none of us can affect a theoretical problem. We can only impact our world and the problems we face. So what am I trying to do? I have built an extremely diverse team. And we use that diverse team to go into communities that are disadvantaged. So the reason we work with the homeless community in Washington, D.C. is those people have potential, they can solve problems, but they are absolutely overlooked. The reason we are working on health equity outcomes in Ward 8 is because the life expectancy of an individual who lives in Ward 8 in Washington, D.C. is 27 years below a person who lives 10 miles away. And that is a structural, systemic issue. That's what I can do in my world. That's what I will continue to do in my world. And what I would say is people closest to the problems usually know how best to solve them. And so when I talk about asking questions, we go into communities and ask questions. The reason we work with the Center for Black Equity is because they probably know more than I do about things that will help level the playing field, bring equity and prosperity to people regardless of their circumstances or their appearance.
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think we have 2 more folks to ask questions, and then we will go to the reception.
Hi, my name is Yuri, and I just graduated in May, and I just started working in October. And so for somebody who has just started out their career, what advice do you have for how I can cultivate my leadership skills from the bottom up in order to manage up with the goal of developing my own leadership skills, but to also help develop the leaders in my team as well? Earlier you mentioned that oftentimes subordinates can prove to be mentors to you, and so I guess what I'm asking for is any best practices that you have seen from your subordinates that have helped you become a better leader today.
So the short answer to your question is solve the problems that are right in front of you and collaborate with the people who are right around you. Now that sounds really basic, but it gets a little bit harder when I tell you that management is not the same as leadership. So what do managers do? By the way, managers are good people. They're important. But a manager produces acceptable results, maybe even excellent results, within existing constraints and conditions. Leaders change constraints and conditions. And you can't solve a problem unless you're willing to change constraints and conditions. When you go into companies or an organization, frequently the message you get is manage, do your job, stick to your lane, follow the process. And you get a lot of signals from people saying, why do you think you can solve that problem? I mean, just stick to your job. And yet, the only way you unlock your own potential, and the only way you unlock potential around you is to actually solve problems. And by the way, that's also what brings people together. You can get the fastest way to bring a diverse team together and get it to a high-performing level is to give it a really tough problem. And people figure out, with help, how to work together effectively to solve that problem or achieve that goal. So look for problems. Ask the people who work for you what they think, and be prepared when somebody comes to you and says, who do you think you are? Why are you trying to solve that problem? That's not your job. The status quo always has enormous power. Always. It's why leadership is hard. It's why it takes courage. It's why you're going to get criticized. The status quo, even if it's very unsatisfying, has power because there are people invested in the status quo. There are people who have succeeded in the status quo. And so, to change it, which is what you got to do, to change the order of things for the better and solve problems, you have to be brave. One little tool that I used early on, I asked my subordinates to give me feedback. This was before 360 feedback was a thing. I asked my subordinates, tell me how you think I'm performing as your boss. What would you like, what do you want me to do, continue to do? What do you want me to stop doing? What do you want me to change or do differently? And it's amazing what you learn. But you have to be certain that you are creating a safe environment where people can actually tell you the truth and you're actually going to hear what they're telling you. I hope that helps. Yes?
Hi, Carly. Thank you for all the points that you've made so far. I'm Dana, a neuroscience major, business minor. I have a question for you. What advice would you give for somebody who's currently in the process of starting her business or company, facing a lot of criticism, especially not very like supportive one, and like kind of like a lot of closed doors, who would essentially starting the company because she sees it as something that will solve problems, as you're saying?
So, starting anything new is difficult. And so, encountering closed doors is part of it. So you shouldn't take that personally. It's hard to do something new. People get stuck in the way things are. It's why the way things stay the way they are for a really long time, because people get stuck there. So don't take it personally when people have a hard time seeing what the value in the new thing that you're trying to talk to them about. Second, sometimes when it feels like someone is rejecting you, maybe what they're actually doing is giving you some feedback about, well, you know, I really like this, but maybe you ought to think about that. So take that on board. Get a thick skin is the first part. Take on board what's really valuable to you, which means you have to be humble, and you have to be, you can't get so wedded to an idea that hasn't been proven that you're not flexible enough and adaptive enough to change that idea. And the final thing that I would say is, again, look for the people who are going to lift you up. Even if someone says to you, you know, I don't think you have it 100%, but gives you some supportive comments, lifts you up, stick with those people. Put your energy into those people. You know, we're all pretty discerning. You know, we learn pretty quickly who's on your side and who's not, who's trying to tear you down and who's trying to lift you up. Go to the people who lift you up. Hope that helps. Good luck.
Thank you. It does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So what's your advice for people who've experienced burnout in their career?
Burnout, such an important topic. So why is it that people experience burnout? Maybe it's because they literally aren't getting enough sleep, or they're not taking care of themselves. So I mean, it may be literally a physical burnout. In which case, the most important thing you can do is get some rest. I know I've had to actually order, and I don't do that very often, subordinates to take a break, because it's clear they're just not functioning. Be honest, you are not functioning well if you're getting no sleep, you're not taking care of yourself, and you're not eating right. You're just not. You're not functioning well. So go get some rest. But often, burnout isn't actually physical. It's not actually that you're too tired. It's that you're emotionally burnt out, or you're spiritually burnt out, or you're just overwhelmed by all the things that you have to juggle. And in each of those cases, I think it is the equivalent of get some rest, meaning pause, reflect, think through what is so soul-crushing about what I'm going through now. We've all had times that were soul-crushing, and then we've had times when we are working incredibly hard and we just feel joyful and energized. Think it through. Why am I so burnt out? Is it because I don't believe in what I'm doing anymore? Is it because I hate the people I'm doing it with? Is it because I'm not having any impact? Is it because it turns out I had a plan and I don't like the plan anymore, and gee, I actually do have to drop out of law school because I can't do this anymore? Pause and reflect and refresh yourself. And the reason that's so incredibly important to do is because you will crush your own potential and your own ability for impact if you allow yourself to continue to be burnt out. And you're worth the investment in a pause and a reflection.
So I think the people in line, those will be our last questions for the evening, and then we can go to the reception.
Hi, Carly. My name is Abby, and I'm a senior. I'll be graduating in May. And I was just, I guess, wondering how you would define success, given your, I guess, years of like vast experience in the workplace. How would you define, success? I guess some people have this idea like success is this is not, success, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And my second question is, I know you said, it's not the best option to have a plan, but rather to have a path. Usually I'm the type of person that likes to have everything mapped out, this and this and this, just keep going just to make everything easier. So I guess what advice would you give to me regarding that?
Yeah. So I think and I wouldn't have known this when I was your age. I wouldn't have known this 20 years ago. I think a successful life is not measured in time or title or position or power or money, although having more of many of those things can be a very good thing. I think a successful life is measured in love, in moments of grace, and in positive contribution and impact. So, when I choose my days, I strive to spend my time in a way that will bring me more love, more moments of grace, and more positive contribution and impact. It's okay to have part of a plan. It's okay to say, this is the industry that I want to go work in when I graduate. When a plan gets to be a problem is when your entire happiness or sense of self-worth depends upon the achievement of a very specific goal. One of the stories I tell in the book is a story about one of my great colleagues and teammates who, when I made the decision to drop out of the presidential race, I don't mind a tough challenge, but there was no path. So it was time to get out. And my team was devastated. And the day after we made that decision, or the day before we made that decision, we'd come home late at night. It was a disappointing primary in New Hampshire, and he rings the doorbell. He was my campaign manager. I open the door. He's devastated, distraught, looks like he's been up all night. And he said, wow, Carly, you look great. You're happy. I had not set my heart on a plan to be president. I was prepared to win the job. I was prepared to lose the job and do something else. I wanted to make a difference, but the position, the title, the money, the power, those are planned destinations, and those don't feed your soul. So have a little bit of a plan. Just make it fuzzy enough that you can see the opportunities that come along, and you can change your mind if you need to.
Thank you.
All right, last question.
Hi, Carly. Zara Syed. Thank you so much for giving back to the TERP community and also just in general for what you do, to give back to the community. My question is about feeding the soul. What do you personally still have left on your bucket list? Where is one place in the world you have not been that you are, that you would love to go to? And lastly, how do you feel about being an American citizen versus a global citizen?
Wow, it's a very thoughtful question. So, questions, actually. So perhaps consistent with my path over plan mentality, here's how I would answer your first question. What's still on my bucket list? What's the one place I haven't been? I don't think about it quite that way. Here's what fuels me, and it's always fueled me. Here's what brings me joy. There is a look that people get when they do something they thought they couldn't do, when they achieve more than they thought they could. We all know the look. I mean, maybe we see it in our kids' eyes, or we see it in, there's a look. And I've been enough places in the world and worked with enough different kinds of people that I know that look is the same the world over. It doesn't matter whether it's men or women or boys or girls or people of color or whites, it doesn't matter. The look is the same everywhere. That look is fuel. So what I want to do is see more of that look in places maybe in particular where you don't see that look very often. Because I know from experience, everybody has potential more than they realize, regardless of their circumstances and appearances. The second part of your question I've now forgotten. So what was the second part?
Where would you love to go that you still haven't been?
I'm sorry?
Where would you love to go in the world that you still have not
that
been?
I still haven't been. I don't know. There are a lot of places I haven't been. Maybe I would have to say now, although I'm a little afraid to do it, which is probably why I should, Antarctica.
Okay.
I've never been there.
Very cool.
But I probably won't see the look in penguins' eyes, so maybe not.
Great. Thank you so much for
Thank you for
coming.
such great questions, and thank you all for being here.